All right, guys, what is going on? Western Civilization 2. We are zooming right now. This looks to be what the lecture format will be for Western Civ classes, at least until um, Easter break, maybe beyond. We'll see. Uh, Basically, I'll just upload a lecture to YouTube and you guys can watch it and take notes. The only notes that you need to actually have are the notes that I've put on the PowerPoints themselves. And I'll explain some more things at the very end of this lecture just to kind of give you an update on where we are, how I'm going to be doing things, lecture-wise, grade-wise, all that stuff, the nitty-gritty stuff. I miss you guys. Hope you guys are staying social on the socials or at least calling each other or getting on Zoom or whatever. Not isolating too bad. Before we get started, let's go ahead and pray. Father, I pray that in a time of just the coronavirus and various people being extremely afraid, as demonstrated by all the things closing down and all the things going off the shelves, particularly toilet paper. I just pray that you would allow the church to be fearless in the time of fearfulness, that these students would place their fear in you. They would be looking out for their neighbors, Lord. Show us as the people of Christ, the followers of Jesus, what to be doing for our neighbors, how to love our neighbor best in the midst of coronavirus, whether that means if we hear they're sick, going out and getting them some groceries, or if it just means social distancing and just letting them know, hey, we still care about them. We pray that your people would follow Jesus in the midst of these crazy circumstances. Pray for each one of these students, Lord. Just make yourself known to them. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So as you can see, the PowerPoint is entitled Revolutions and Nations. This is the path toward world war. This is really a two-part series, but we're just going to talk about one. So we talked about socialism, and we ended with particularly the Communist Manifesto, right, and Marxism. We talked about its distinctives. What we're going to see now is in these liberal, nationalistic, socialistic times, there's going to be just an upheaval in Europe like never before, particularly around the year 1848, which is nicknamed the year of revolutions. And what you're starting to see is these socialistic, liberalistic, nationalistic things being enacted by the people. All of Europe essentially is catching up with France to a certain degree, but France is still going strong too. So that's what we're going to see. In the second kind of part, we'll look at particularly Italy and Germany and how they become nations, right? And once we get there, once they're nations, we are literally at World War One. As soon as Italy and Germany become nations, it's not long after we're at World War One. But what we'll see in this lecture is the seeds that are going to really lead Europe towards a world war. You're going to see alliances broken. You're going to see the concert of Europe during Napoleon's time broken. You're going to see some crazy times. So let's look at our next slide. There we go. So let's give some backdrop to the year of revolution is 1848. We've kind of said some of these things, but liberalism and nationalism combined with unemployment and food shortages lead to a year of revolution and just upheaval, right? Nations declaring that they need to be their own independent nations, and liberals crying out for a people-oriented constitutional government, and then that combined with the poor feeling oppressed, right, from food shortages or unemployment. That's going to be the perfect storm that's going to produce the year of revolutions. By the way, if you can hear my kids screaming in the background, it's because they're screaming in the background. So never in a single year has Europe known so many uprisings. Germans, Hungarians, Italians, French, Czechs, and others fight to create national states to reorganize or replace the current political entities. We're going to see this especially in Austria, or also known as the Habsburg Empire. So France, let's start with them. The Second Republic, and it's not going to last long. So again, just as a reminder, you had the Bourbon Kingdom, right? The Louis the 14th. You had the Sun King, right? Louis the 14th, and you had his sons. And then you had the French Revolution with Louis the 15th and Louis the 16th. And that eliminated the Bourbons, literally executed as citizen Capet. They make it into a republic, which then goes through some changes. There's the terror and all the things that we've already talked about. Robespierre, right? Shooting himself, his jaw broken, didn't die. They matched up his jaw so he couldn't talk, and he's laying on the desk of the Committee of Public Safety, and only to go to his death the next day. We talked about all that, right? And so France then turns to Napoleon, who turns it into an empire, basically like the kingdom before, makes it stable, and makes it a world power, and then starts taking over all of Europe. Europe, unites against Napoleon and defeats him. And then France, the Bourbon Kingdom, is put right back into power. And where we left off with Louis Philippe as the new king. Well, guess what? Another French Revolution. People take to the streets. They throw out their furniture, they barricade the streets, and they're fighting against the army, and another revolution breaks out. And so during this time, the National Assembly is put back into place. It established itself kind of as the so-called government, and Louis Blanc, basically, along with a middle-class provisional government, organized many kind of what were deemed socialistic workshops. Basically, they were trying to help the unemployed. But they were later shut down because, again, I said they were socialistic. They were shut down for that reason because the National Assembly was afraid that the people would revolt in good socialistic fashion, like Marxism, and would try to take over and make their own government. So they were shut down, and again, people take to the streets, they barricade, and it's a time of just, there's no consistency, there's no stability. And what happens? Louis Napoleon happens. That's who happens. He becomes the president. Now, who is Louis Napoleon? It's the best of both worlds. You get King Louis and you get Napoleon. He's the nephew of Napoleon. And he becomes president. And as he's president, he appeals to the National Assembly to amend the Constitution to allow him to be reelected as president, because his term's up and he's not allowed to be reelected. He wants to appeal so they can be reelected, and essentially he wants to be president forever. They deny his claim, and so he raises an army himself, takes the National Assembly by force, and makes himself eventually Emperor Napoleon III. Emperor Napoleon III. So here we go again. It's cyclical. We're just repeating ourselves. But Emperor Napoleon III. So as just to kind of show you this, 200 people die in this battle, right? 26,000 are arrested. 10,000 are sent kind of to Siberia in exile. But by the time of 1852, once again, France goes from republic back to empire. 7.6 million of the citizens supported this measure, supported his takeover, voted for it. They were like grateful for it. And he was only really opposed by 600,000. As we look at that, you can tell that at least the country turned to Napoleon. They seemed to support him. We don't really know. I mean, it's possible that the reason 7.6 million voted for him is because he took it by force and he would just kill them or exile them or arrest them like he had done with the other people. It's possible there. But also, it's very likely that France is turning to Napoleon because of his namesake, right? If you look back at history, even though people are opposed to this idea of a dictator or an absolute powerful king, the most peaceful and stable times in French history, especially post-medieval French history, has been the Sun King, Louis XIV, and his absolute monarchy, and Napoleon. The most prosperous time for France was Napoleon. I mean, he almost had all of Europe if it wouldn't have been for Britain, right? And that pesky dog Scooby-Doo. So it is most likely that France just, they're turning to Napoleon because it's the last time that they were stable. And stability is going to be better than just so-called liberal slash nationalistic ideals and all these other things, socialistic ideals. So they turn to Napoleon, and he is now emperor, and that's where we're going to leave France. So let's turn over to the Habsburg Empire, aka Austria. We're going to start off with Louis Kossuth, a Magyar nationalist. Now, Magyars, they were basically Hungarians, people from Hungary. They called for Hungary's independence from Austria. So they're on the nationalistic surge, and they're saying, look, we have nothing in common with you guys. You guys are practically German. We are not. We would like independence. They attempted to recruit the serfs, because Austria at this point still had serfs. They were still a serfdom kind of nation where you had lords and workers, so to speak. And so the idea here was the students would go out into Austria, and they would go to the serfs, and they would kind of sow discontent among them. Very socialistic, right? This idea of the power of struggles. You guys are serfs. You have been oppressed your whole life. And don't you want to just join our cause, and we'll give you freedom, right? As Hungary rises, you will rise with us. Well, Austria's response to this, they emancipated all the serfs. They gave them their freedom. They tried to so-called integrate it into society, although that's always going to be a hard thing to do. But they do it. And this essentially removes the teeth of the Magyars' argument for why the serfs should join them. So they have no reason to fight with the Magyars against Austria, and so they don't. So kind of stage two of this is the Magyars just revolt, and their hopes here is they want to see an independent Hungary, though they would still call Ferdinand their emperor. So they would be independent from Austria, though they would still be under the same emperor as Austria. They'd have their own laws, but ultimately they'd be under the same emperor, but they would have different laws. It's a little confusing, but that was kind of the ideal. And it looked like they were going to have success. But in January 5th, 1849, Austria was reinforced by 200,000 soldiers from Russia. They crushed the rebellion. Now, if they had lost, what would have ended up happening is the Romanians, the Croatians, the Magyars, and the Czechs would all likely demand the same thing. They'd become nations, and Austria would have been broken up into so many small pieces that it would no longer be the Habsburg Empire. So this is where we leave them. They were able to put down the quote unquote nationalistic rebellion for now. So moving over to Germany, part two, because Austria was made up of a lot of German people groups as well. But Prussia. This is quote unquote modern day Germany. They also are having their problems. In 1848, the year of revolutions, many people of Berlin created a large kind of disturbance, kind of they're standing out picketing, right? The kind of protests that we see today. They create a large disturbance outside of King Frederick William IV's kind of government area. And he refuses to put the troops out on him. He doesn't want to see him hurt, even though still in this crowd, in this picket line, several were killed anyways. Now, to ease them, he comes out onto the balcony and he kind of gives them a salute. And then he kind of makes this promise: I will focus on German unification, right? This idea of a united Germany, a constitution for all of Germany. And this would have included some of the Germans in the Austria areas as well. So kind of a side note, just to Remember, Prussia is a very militaristic nation. This was the nation that said, whereas other countries have an army, this army essentially has a country, right? So they were that country. They were 15th in population, but third in size of their army or something crazy like that. So, and the army was very loyal to the king. So King Frederick William IV had the loyalty of the army. Now, in order to instill even further loyalty, they broke their voting system into kind of three classes based on tax brackets. Meaning, if you paid the most taxes, you had the most vote. So an example of this would be the highest tax bracket, which was only 5% of the population. And this would have been the rich. They would have been the ones that were able to pay the most. They elected over 33% and a third repeated of the parliament. So 5% elected a third of the parliament, right? So the rich, again, are kind of controlling the parliament. And this is going to sow in this disunity in the parliament when it's going to work hard to make a constitution that pleases all German peoples and pleases the king. Remember, conservative governments are made up of three things mainly. They're made up of a legitimate monarchy or a legitimate government. So in this case, King Frederick William IV is the legitimate king. They're made up of a stable church, right? The religion is the same, right? And that's true of this nation. But the third part, right, and this is the part that pertains to this, that keeps the rich rich. Well, this is exactly what that is, right? 5% of the population, the super rich, are able to pay the most taxes, and they get the most votes, and they elect over a third of the parliament, which is going to obviously favor them and keep them rich. So moving on to that, the Frankfurt Parliament meets and it flounders. It's trying to write a constitution that pleases all the Germanic peoples, the Southern and Northern Confederacy Germanic peoples, the Austrian Germanic peoples, so as to unite them under one constitution. But on top of that, it's trying to please the rich, right? And it's also obviously trying to please King Frederick William IV. They flounder for a bit, for almost a year trying to write. They offer it finally to Frederick in 1849. It wasn't pleasing to the Germanic peoples. It wasn't pleasing to the king. And so he rejects it, and then he dissolves by force. He literally drives out the Frankfurt Parliament with his army. And so Germany was trying to unite, but only to fail here. But we'll see. Maybe a little bit later they will have success. So this last part of this lecture I want to look at is the Crimean War. And we'll look at this on 2 slides. We'll look at the cause of the war and kind of the outcome, if you will, of the war. But let's, this is important because this is what's going to set up later on the future unification and even the future world wars. It's going to crack the alliances of the current alliances in Europe, and then it's going to allow for new alliances to kind of be formed. So let's look at the causes. There's 2. Numero uno. The Ottoman Empire had recently granted Catholic France, rather than Orthodox Russia, oversight of the Christian shrines in the Holy Land. It's important. So Catholic France, instead of Eastern Orthodox Russia, is getting oversight of these Christian shrines, okay, in the Crimean area, the Black Sea area. Now, history lesson, right? All the way back in the 1000s AD, the Eastern Orthodox Church splintered and split from the Roman Catholic Church, mainly because of language reasons. There were some theological reasons. There were some political reasons. The Eastern Orthodox Church spoke Greek. The Roman Catholic Church spoke Latin. So there was those reasons as well. So now the French are able to have these kind of holy shrines, right? Some of these things that are described in the New Testament, Asia Minor and stuff like that, that were held in high esteem by both Christian faiths. Now the Catholics get it, and it's the Muslims who grant them access, right? So that's one reason. The second thing is just straight up, Russia wanted to extend its control over certain Ottoman provinces like Moldavia and Wallachia, which is basically modern day Romania. So for these 2 reasons, you get kind of this classic argument, right? Like the classic crusades of old, the Tsar uses his duty to protect Orthodox Christians in the Ottoman Empire as a reason to occupy Moldavia and Wallachia. And then, in essence, the Ottoman Empire, in return of this occupation, declared war on Russia. Thus, the Crimean War begins. And this is what it really leads to. France and Britain, they don't want Russia to extend its borders. So one of the first times ever, they support the Ottoman Empire instead of, something that would be more beneficial to Europe. So we saw like the Greek Revolution, we saw the Serbian Revolution, where the concert of Europe supported the Greeks and the Serbs because it benefited Europe more, because mainly it was going to give part of Europe back from the Ottoman empires. Well, this time it's the reverse. Now Britain and France are actually going to help the Ottoman Turks indirectly by declaring war in 1854 on Russia. Austria and Prussia remain neutral. Austria was just supplied 200,000 troops from Russia to help them out against the Hungarians, and yet they remain neutral. So even neutral is not good for Russia. It's going to be seen as an offense. Russia ultimately is defeated, and they sign in the Treaty of Paris a treaty. They basically agree to the neutrality of the Black Sea, and they withdraw their claims on the two provinces of the Ottoman Empire. But really, the biggest result of the Crimean War here is the shattering of the concert of Europe. Remember this alliance system that pledged to put down revolutions and rebellions throughout Europe and South and Central America that we saw, right? This thing is shattered now. France, Britain, Russia, and Austria and Prussia, they don't like each other, or they don't all like each other. And so this is a quote from your book. After 1856, there were more powers willing to fight to overthrow the existing order than there were to take up arms to defend it. There's more powers willing to overthrow the existing order than to defend it. The concept of Europe is gone. For the next 25 years, Europe is unstable. Foreign policy is just going to be, people are going to be adventuring out, expanding out, making nations, and it's just going to be extremely unstable, which paves the way for Italy and Germany to become its own nation. It paves the way for new alliances to form within Europe that could lead to a bigger world war. Hint, hint, that's where we're going. So that's it for today's lecture. And just to give you kind of an update again, between now and at least spring break, this is the way that we'll do lectures. It'll be shorter lectures uploaded onto YouTube, 20 to 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes max long. You can click them on your RenWeb lesson plans, watch the lecture for that day. Just take notes on the bullet points in the actual PowerPoint. And that's really it for that. Assignments are going to remain 2 a week, kind of as normal. And one of those assignments will always be, until the research paper is done, it'll be giving you time for your research paper. So one history assignment, and then obviously some time for your research paper. Now, for assignments, if you guys will, I'm a little fluid as to when they need to be turned in by. So a Tuesday assignment, if you don't get it to me by Wednesday, that's fine. All assignments for the week must be turned in to me by Friday of that week. Does that make sense? Now, I would like you to do your history assignments on a Google Doc and then share the Google Doc with my email address, cmiller.lpa@gmail.com. This allows me to look. If I want to write some notes, some critiques, or some things like that, I will. If not, just assume you got 100. What I'm grading for is I'm literally just looking at your content, make sure you did it right. You didn't leave something like, oh, I didn't do kappa, or oh, I didn't do the paragraph that was supposed to go with kappa. I'll make that note on there. You forgot to do this paragraph, -20 or whatever, and I'll put the grade in RenWeb. But for the most part, I'm just gonna, put your grades in RenWeb, and it's gonna be almost completion grading, just for these next couple of weeks until we get kind of a better system in place. But I'll make notes on Google Doc if you get something less um, than 100. Tests and quizzes are a little bit different. Again, you can still do them via Google Doc, or you can just write them down and then take pictures of them, or you can turn them in physically, whatever, to Lake Point at Fridays on the drop-off day. That's all good and dandy. Tests and quizzes are only going to count as at-home assignment grades. So there's no pressure on this. No pressure. You shouldn't feel any pressure whatsoever. I'm literally just doing these things so that I can see, oh, this person's tracking, or oh, this person's not tracking. I need to give more content in the lectures, or I need to slow the lectures down, or whatever. So there's no pressure, but I would ask you to take them like you would a normal test. Study for it, do it in like an hour period, turn it in. Don't consult your notes. Don't consult other students. Don't talk to other students. Just do it. And I'm going to grade it normally, but again, it's only going to be an at-home assignment grade. So don't freak out that even if I use the language test, it literally is just allowing me to know, hey, is our Zoom working? Is this working for us or not? So that's kind of how we're going to do this for the next few weeks until spring break. And obviously, if there's something else drastically changing, I'll update you guys on that. If you guys have any questions or concerns or whatever, text, call, email. If there's enough of the same question, like say we're getting to a test and everyone has the same question, they didn't get it from the lectures, maybe we can set up like a Zoom discussion with one another and take it that way. All right, guys. I miss you all. I hope you guys are staying safe, and mainly I hope you're not isolated and feeling lonely. Reach out to people. We've got Zoom, we've got text messaging, we got all these things, right? But that doesn't replace our physical presence. But nonetheless, may the Lord bless you all. Thank you. And now I am going to scroll up and hit the stop button whenever I can.